Okay, good morning, Dad.
Good
Today
morning.
is Friday, October 25th, and let's talk about this story that's been in the news through the past week, and it seems to be building up some steam, is the idea that there are North Korean troops are entering the fight alongside Russia. And I'm just going to read you some headlines. This is from
Okay.
NBC News. North Korean troops will begin fighting alongside Russian forces as soon as this weekend. The New York Times from 2 days ago says U.S. says North Korean troops are in Russia to aid fight against Ukraine. And then just 16 hours ago, New York Times, why is North Korea deploying troops to help Russia? Newsweek just had a headline the past day. Zelensky says North Korean troops on front lines in days. So what's going on here?
This is a really funny story. I mean, when I first heard about it, I just laughed it off. And I still find it laughable in a lot of ways. We started hearing, I think it's maybe even 2 weeks ago, more than a week ago anyway. Yeah, about North Korean troops in Russia. Yeah, being sent to the front lines in Ukraine to aid the Russians, as this headlines claim. Now, if you look at the sources of these stories, you find that there are two main sources. One is South Korea, and the other is Ukraine. And these are the sources that are making the claims that the Russians are going to be, or rather, the North Koreans are going to be fighting with the Russians, against the Kiev regime's forces in Ukraine. Now, I know Lloyd Austin came out with a statement just a couple days ago, or maybe it was even yesterday, and his was a little bit more careful. He said that we know that there are Russian troops in.
North Korean troops.
I keep on doing that. Sorry. Yeah, we know that there are North Korean troops in Russia, um, but we don't have any confirmation that they're being sent to the front lines. So anyway, when I heard that, just sounded like that sounded real. It's kind of interesting that actually we tend to get more realistic statements, it seems to me, all in all, from the Pentagon. Not necessarily from their spokesman, but from from Lloyd Austin himself. Um, Now, so what do we make of this? I have a scoop. Everyone here is going to hear this is a scoop. Our correspondent in Moscow can confirm that there are North Korean troops in Russia. In fact, in Moscow itself. She saw them today on the metro.
Oh,
She saw
really?
four. Yeah, she saw four of them, and they. First of all, she noticed, well, they're Asian looking. That's not weird, actually. You see a lot of very Asian looking people. There are a lot of Asians in Russia, in Moscow, but they were unusually short, and they were all wearing uniforms. And she went over and she looked, and she saw that they had North Korean flags on their uniforms.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
So just so people listening, our correspondent in Moscow is your daughter, my sister. So
Right,
that's
exactly. And now the interesting thing is that well, I mean, that's interesting in itself, but even more interesting is the fact that her coworker also observed North Korean troops on the metro in Moscow a week ago.
Hmm.
And first of all, like just today, I was reading these breathless reports, like from the New York Times and other mainstream media sources in the West, and they're saying the Ukrainian intelligence is reporting this. You'd think that the North Koreans are kind of like they're lurking, they're in disguise. And in fact, that was a suggestion made by a lot of these reports that they're actually disguised as Russians. They're wearing Russian military uniforms, and they're trying to hide their presence. But we've discovered them. And again, this is what's being reported, in Western media, and it just shows you the absence of any kind of journalism in Russia. Because look, I mean, just every Russian, every Moscow resident obviously knows they've been here, and they've been in at least for a week, because they're on the metro and they're not trying to hide anything.
Right.
So I find that just hilarious in itself. Now the whole question is like, why are they there? I don't know. I don't think there's it doesn't. I can't see any reason for them to go to the front lines. I mean, the Russians are getting 30,000 new troops every month. They have hundreds of thousands of troops in reserve, in the SMO region. Why they would need, 10,000 or so North Korean troops, it doesn't make a bit of sense to me. Maybe there is some sort of special role, or, that they can perform. I don't know what that would be. But it would create a lot of problems, I would think, for the Russians. Others have pointed this out, like Brian Berletic. It's just that the most obvious one is that they don't speak Russian. And the Russians don't speak North Korean. And I mean, communication is so important. Korean, right. There's not a North Korean. So, it seems like it would not at all be helpful. And again, maybe there's some specialized roles, but I don't think they're going to the front lines. I don't think there's any reason. They're clearly there, confirmed by our correspondent in Moscow, your sister. But they're not trying to hide it, as a lot of these reports have suggested. She said that she saw, 4 of them, on the metro, and they were in their uniforms, but they were clearly off duty. I mean, they had kind of like personal backpacks and clearly very relaxed. They were probably just, exploring Moscow. So who knows? I mean, it's nothing strange about North Korean soldiers being in Russia. That's something that we should have expected. The two countries have a mutual defense treaty. So it's just quite natural that there would be some that would come for training or, for any kind of discussions. Who knows?
That was very recent, though. That was about a year ago when that mutual defense treaty, or is it?
No. I think it was much more recent than that. It was just a few months ago that was reached.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay, I knew that there was talk of, when they went over there to try to get artillery shells or something like this. Is that true as well, the artillery shells?
I keep on hearing that. It's just never been confirmed. It might be. There's been a lot of hysteria about that. I find that story much more believable than a lot of the other stories, because that's something apparently that the North Koreans can make a lot of. And it's something that that's very important to this war in Ukraine. The Russians are outproducing the West at a rate of close to 10 to 1, when it comes to artillery shells. But they say, hey, sure, if we can get a couple million more, then we can make it 20 to 1. Why not? Again, it hasn't been confirmed. I don't see, why it couldn't happen. I think that's certainly very possible. The stories about the missiles and so on, again, there has been no confirmation, and I don't just see why. I think, again, the Russian missiles clearly, they're not lacking for missiles, either in quality or quantity. Why would they want North Korean missiles? The only thing I could think of is that the North Koreans asked them to test a few or something in combat conditions. That's a possibility. But again, we just don't have any confirmation, and I don't believe it. And why there should be any hysteria about North Koreans selling artillery shells to Russia. Well, it's the rules-based international order. Again, we make the rules, we give the orders, and the orders are that nobody can sell any munitions of any kind to Russia. And we can sell billions, give hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine. Those are the rules. How dare you try to break them? It's kind of even silly. There's stories that Iran has supplied different weapons to Russia. And, the Iranians have denied this. It's just, but why even deny it? Who cares? Again, it's just like, don't even show any respect for the rules-based international orders. Who cares about their orders? It's just the whole thing is so obscene. So anyway, there are North Korean troops in Moscow. At least 4 of them. I think both times 4 were observed.
Sure, much more.
We don't know if they're the same 4, probably not, but who knows? And what it means, I don't know. I highly doubt. I cannot see the reason for sending him to the front line. If the Russians are sending him to the front line, they must have some reason, but I don't know what it is. It seems like it would only cause problems for them. First of all, it would be difficult, in fact, impossible to integrate them into the troops that they have there already. And then second, it gives the West an excuse for sending foreign troops into Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that seems like the play clearly
I think
is
that's
to
why they're making this, yeah,
right
creating the
to try
story.
to drum up the support and the justification for sending in actual NATO troops because Russia is calling in North Korea. And I think it's also just the fact that it's North Korea paints a really kind of scary image. North Korea, it's interesting because North Korea has just been so isolated for so long. Just the idea of seeing North
Yeah.
Koreans anywhere is like seeing a super rare Pokemon, super exotic creature. You just don't,
Right.
North Korea has been completely isolated, completely
Right.
closed, and you think that the only people that get out are the people that escaped, because of just
Yeah.
we just hear these horror
Right.
stories, and I
Yeah.
believe that it's a
Yeah, a
horrible,
lot of the horror stories,
completely
especially in the past. I don't know what the present situation is, but I know that life in North Korea was really wretched, and in fact, there was a serious famine that killed millions, I believe. Certainly hundreds of thousands, and that was well anyway. But I don't know what the present conditions. I know that they're quite a bit better, but I don't really know what they're like now. I imagine like having like these troops that are taking the metro in Moscow are having the time of their lives, or it must be an extraordinary experience for them too. It's like going to another planet.
right, right. I mean, they're completely closed off from they have their own intranet, right? It's completely closed off. Everything is isolated except for some South Korean pamphlets that get dropped on them, and apparently North Koreans are dropping trash back on South Korea. So,
Right.
little tensions there. Yeah, it's. I just feel. I wonder how Kim Jong Un is probably ecstatic that he's no longer completely isolated. That he's opened
Yeah.
up
No,
now. That he
it's a
has
real
this
breakthrough for
relationship. Right. So, what do you think this just means for the future of North Korea? Do you think we can start to see the less of this iron grip on North Korea? We might actually see North Koreans taking vacations to Moscow, not just military troops, and that it can
Uh-huh.
start to become part of the real
Well,
world again.
I think so. I think so. I mean, the fact that there were just four of them on the metro is an example of that. That was impossible. Now these four guys, apparently unsupervised, are just are are just exploring Moscow. And yeah, Russia is a very big country. Maybe the rest of the world is off limits to them. But if North Koreans are allowed to explore Russia, or at least to go to certain places in Russia, I mean, that's a big step forward. And I think we could see a continual, kind of loosening of the grip, as you put it. And that's good for North Korea, and it's also good. It's good for Russia too.
Well, what about just South Korea? The whole idea of unification. Which can you tell me a little bit about the current? Because it's a frozen conflict, right? It's never been resolved. We just have this demarcation
Right.
separating, and the South Koreas, they're always they're the good guys, and objectively so. You look at their economy and their growth. I
Yeah.
have been to South Korea multiple times. It's a great place. I haven't gone to North Korea, but there are trips. When I was in China, I knew some people that did trips to North Korea. Very guided tours. But is there's this you think this idea that what is it? Does the North feel like it has to take the South, or does the South feel like it has to retake the North and unify, and there be one Korea? Is that the situation? Do both have that stance
Well,
that there is going to be a reunification?
yeah, my understanding is they do. Just like, in fact, Taiwan officially, that I should say, the Republic of China officially has that stance vis-a-vis China. Though the DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party, which is the independence party in Taiwan, is clearly moving away from that and going away from unification to real independence. But that's a side issue. I don't know so much about Korean politics. But yeah, that's my understanding, is that both of them believe that Korea needs to be unified someday. Not too long ago, there were real moves towards, improving relations. Past presidents of South Korea have been much more active on that front, have had that as part of their policy, was to try to improve relations and actually achieve peaceful reunification. The current president, I understand, is really kind of a neocon, or he's in alliance with the neocons, I should say. And and is kind of has clearly taken, embraced the globalist cause. So better than a year ago, there was news that the South Koreans had sold some hundreds of thousands of artillery shells to Ukraine. They kind of pretended they didn't do it. They sent them to the U.S. who then sent them on to Ukraine. Clearly they had, and that's something that greatly angered, Russia, because Russia actually at that time had good relations with South Korea, with both North Korea, and I think that's part of what led to, the Mutual Defense Treaty with North Korea. It's just that before, the Russians may have been reluctant to take that step because they wanted to maintain these good relations with South Korea, but the South Koreans ended those good relations by joining the hostilities, against Russia. So now, you get all this hysteria from South Korea. It's frankly, who should they blame? They should blame themselves. They stupidly, took sides in a war that had nothing to do with them, and now they're suffering the consequences.
Do you think the South Koreans are getting a little bit worried that with this mutual defense treaty between Russia and North Korea, that that things might turn against them, that North Korea may try to retake the South? Is there some saber rattling? Is that an actual possibility?
Well, the thing is, there's just always saber rattling there, especially from the North Korean side. So it's hard to tell, what's rhetoric and what might have a little bit more substance to it. It's certainly, what I would say is that it should extinguish any dreams of South Korea or, together with the United States, retaking North Korea. Obviously they can't do it if they have the Russians supporting them. I'm sure that the Russians do not want the North Koreans launching an invasion against South Korea. And I'm sure that that may have been like kind of preliminary to the Mutual Defense Treaty. It says, like, you guys aren't going to do that, are you? Right. And if the North Koreans in fact did attack South Korea, it's a mutual defense treaty, so Russia would not be obligated to help them. That's typically true of such a treaty. So I don't know if it really makes any much of a difference, as far as North Korea attacking South Korea. But if anybody had dreams of attacking North Korea, I think those are gone. Any notion of that is going to be off the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's scary about this conflict is how it's starting to spread and get connected to other regions. I mean, talking about Asia now, I mean, we haven't touched Asia much at all. And then, Iran as well being drawn in within Russia, that defense treaty that, I don't know, has it been signed yet now? I mean, what's going on?
They're supposed to sign it like very, very soon. Recently, Pezeshkian and Putin at the BRICS summit actually did meet, and they said, yeah, this is, we're going to be doing this soon. I think Pezeshkian's going to go directly to Moscow for that. So it could be just a few days or a couple of weeks, something like that. Yeah. And now it's not, I don't know if it's a true mutual defense treaty. Now, it is going to be some kind of defense treaty, about increasing defense cooperation. There's already quite a bit of cooperation, but they're going to increase. Now, in a true alliance, you say, well, if one of us is attacked, the other will come to his defense, right? So that's what Russia has with North Korea. I don't think that's in the cards for Iran. Meaning that, like, if, for example, they could sign this treaty tomorrow, and then the day after, Israel, and this really could happen, of course, launches a major attack on Iran, and then Russia would actually be obligated to attack Israel. They don't want that to happen. I don't think they're going to risk that. But they are, they've made it clear, and I think through this treaty that's about to be signed, they'll make it even clearer that we firmly support Iran, and we are there to strengthen their defenses. We are there to help them, if they come into conflict with another country. And I think we already knew that, but it's just going to be just clarified and intensified.
Right. Yeah, but I'm seeing kind of just a web starting to connect a lot of the world now. You've got Iran and the conflict in the Middle East starting to merge with connections with Russia, and Russia with North Korea and the tensions between North Korea and South Korea, and then you have China and Taiwan. There's just the there everything is there for a huge global conflict if it ever gets there, and I hope people are at the top are wise enough to not trigger it. But this thing could really, it could really explode. I don't. I think we're sane enough where it won't, but I also have this fear that when you have desperate actors like Zelensky and Netanyahu, that they may try to start fires and maybe not necessarily.
They clearly are trying to start fires, and it seems to me that Netanyahu has really been successful. There's just no question about it. He has created the escalation that he wants, and we're going to see it. We are going to see an attack with U.S. involvement on Iran. I don't think there's any question about it. Zelensky has done all kinds of crazy things, like, shelling nuclear power plants and sending drones against them, attempting to capture them. And I think quite possibly, clearly assassinating individuals within Russia. And we haven't really heard anything about this in the last year, but there was that Crocus City Hall attack. And there are certainly a lot of fingerprints of Ukraine on that. Anyway, it's clear that he'll try anything, any sort of provocation, to expand the war and bring the West in on his side.
Right, and now I'm just thinking, could he even try to do? I mean, that's what he's doing with this North Korea story, and South Korea is participating in it as well. They're just fanning the flames of this idea, drawing in another actor, and so. I'm wondering, is there something else that he could potentially try to set off between South Korea and North Korea, or I don't know. That's just another world that I haven't even thought about, that Ukraine could potentially be trying to get involved in trying to trigger something in Asia to pull in NATO, because Japan and South Korea are part of NATO.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, no, they're not actually part of NATO. I think they have some sort of associate. NATO has talked about expanding into East Asia, and at that point it ceased to be NATO, but they are not actual NATO members.
Okay.
They have a close relationship with them. They are close military allies of the U.S. That's what you could fairly say.
Okay. So what do you think is going to happen in terms of the West responding to these stories? Do you think that they're going to actually, what's the next move for NATO? Are they going to try to float the idea of sending troops to Ukraine again and see how it's taken, or what's the point of this move? I mean, that's the point
again,
of it,
it's
right?
really what matters. We get all these absurd stories in the Western press, and I mean, just the whole Western press has turned into a joke. We talked a little bit last time about their coverage of the BRICS summit, and I've seen more of it, and it just gets sillier and sillier. I mean, it's not just that it's propaganda, but it's stupid propaganda. But anyway, there's all these alarmist reports about the North Korean soldiers, going to the front lines in Ukraine. But I think the one statement that really matters is the one that Lloyd Austin made. And because it's the U.S. military that really gets to decide. The U.S. military is basically NATO. Plus, you say NATO, it's the U.S. military plus Turkey. I mean, the other day we were talking about troops. Actually, I went and double checked. I said something like, 250,000 American soldiers. I was way off. It's like 1.25 million, 1,250,000.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
So anyway, my apologies for that. But so that just shows you, it's like 90% of the troops in NATO are actually U.S. troops, or like at least 80%, and then the remainder are basically Turkish troops. I mean, it's just a sprinkling, in countries like France and the UK and Germany. It really doesn't amount to anything. Maybe there's a bit more in Poland. Maybe we're talking about like 5% of the total. So I might not have the percentages completely right, but it's just overwhelmingly the U.S. and then Turkey. So anyway, it was, Lloyd Austin gave a measured, and we can say confirmed by your sister, a truthful statement that there are North Korean troops in Russia, but he wouldn't go beyond that. And so I don't think, there are all these alarmist stories, but this is the media, the Western media, doing what it always does, and that's just passing on, the absurd things that the Ukraine tells them. That's what Western reporting on Ukraine is all about. That's it. I mean, really, there's no real reporting. Nobody even bothered to take the metro, apparently, and none of the journalists, Western journalists in Moscow, never even bothered to take the metro. They could have actually had a scoop, at least a week ago if they had.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe let's pivot over to the Israel-Iran situation. Do you know what's going on with Israel's planned retaliatory attack? And now we're over 3 weeks. Do you think it's possible that this intelligence leak really spooked them, or that they might be happy that this leak came out because now they have an excuse not to do the attack? What's your take on what's going on here?
Well, I think it was actually John Mearsheimer very perceptively pointed out that really not much was revealed by this leak. He says he believes it's a real leak, but not much was revealed by it. And by the way, I mean, his kind of viewpoint on a source of the leak was similar to ours. It was either an individual who wanted to delay the attack, or it could have been actually like a faction. In that case, it would probably be somebody higher up. Again, he didn't name names, but we could go all the way to the top, who just wants to slow things down and just hoping that Israel won't attack until after the election. I think that's probably what the hope is. But not a whole lot was revealed. It was air defense targets. I think all that tells you is that they were planning a major attack, because that's typically what you do. The first wave is to go after, radar installations and interceptor missile batteries. And that's apparently, that was the list of targets. Now, I'm sure that that's of some help to the Iranians. And then there was some more detailed information, like specifically what kind of missiles were going to be used and fired from what kind of, aircraft. So that would be helpful. Now, maybe that fact has forced the fact that was leaked has forced the Israelis to go back to the drawing board and maybe decide on using maybe a different approach to using different aircraft, or possibly using some of their submarines or something. So I don't know.
You think for sure they will carry something out? They will.
I am sure. Yeah, it's just all the signals are. It would actually, if they don't, then it would be a major victory for Iran. It would be a real humiliation, because they have gone out on a limb on this. It's not just they suggest they might do it, but they have sworn that they will do it, that Iran will pay the price, that it's going to be, it's going to be a massive, brutal attack. That they don't use the word brutal. Everything they do is civilized, of course, but so they will do it. I don't think there's any question. But again, as we said, this is difficult. It's just not clear that they can succeed. And I think that's why they keep on, maybe they keep on getting new intelligence, like, oh, the Iranians have just moved this, the Iranians have activated that, so that plan we had earlier, it's not going to work. Let's try something else. That may be part of what's going on. I'm sure that the Iranians aren't just sitting there. They're making guesses about what the Israelis are going to do, and they're kind of configuring their forces accordingly.
Yeah, I just was thinking maybe they figure they can't do it, and this is the leak could be potentially a way out for them to say, like, because also they can't do this attack without the United States' help, right? And if the U.S. is really kind of holding firm on some of it,
but I don't think they're holding firm. It's typical. I mean, this is what we've always seen in the past. There are a lot of people in the U.S. that don't like, what the Israelis are doing, and they'll leak or whatever, but when push comes to shove, they do what the Israelis tell them to do. And again, it may be, it's not, this leak, I think, shows that at least they want to delay it. It doesn't mean that they want to stop it, right? I don't think there's really anybody in power who is serious about stopping the Israelis. But you could see how the Harris team, and Biden would want to delay it until after the election.
It's just so crazy to me that this is happening. Everybody knows what's going to happen. That okay, Israel is going to do this thing, and when they do it, all hell's going to break loose. Iran's going to unleash ballistic missiles across and blow up half of Israel's infrastructure, and then there's a good chance that maybe, if depending on how much the U.S. is involved in this retaliatory strike, that our own bases could be at
Right.
risk. And then all of a sudden, boom, we're on the cusp of really World War III. And everybody's just sitting around like, well, this is just what's happening, and there's nothing we can do about
Yeah,
it. When
we
there's
don't have
clearly
anybody.
something we could do about it.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. If we actually had a statesman in charge, somebody who really did care about the good of the country more than the good of the Democratic Party or the viewpoints, the desires of the mega donors, this would be just shut down. They cannot do this without our support and our direct participation. Unfortunately, the news is that a number of tankers, U.S. Air refueling tankers, were recently moved into position. So that's another signal it may happen very soon.
it's one of those things that we're not making huge leaps to say that there's some impending catastrophe if we allow this to happen. It's there. Everybody sees it. It's right there, and we just are going to allow it to happen. Like, how many people are going? But I always ask this question: just why? Why are we allowing this to happen? Is it really the power of the Israeli lobby, and they're just all powerful up until the presidential election? But right after November 5th, do you think things will change?
Oh, not very much. It's just like in the end, because it just. I don't know. They won't change. They won't change. I mean, it'll just go. It's just that at this time it's particularly sensitive, and again, I think actually Harris, if Biden, if they're trying to delay it, they may have even kind of miscalculated. In the end, it just might not make any difference, or they could, in the short run, play it to their advantage. But there seems to be a general fear or a general idea that let's try to not talk about foreign policy, that's kind of a weak area for us. Whoops.
You still there?
Yeah. Okay. What happened there?
You refocused. You were really fuzzy. I wasn't sure if it was. I don't know. Maybe it was just on mine. We'll see afterwards how fuzzy.
Okay.
It were,
All right.
Anyways.
Okay. Anyway, I was just saying that there seems to be a general reluctance, a consensus within the Democratic Party that foreign policy is not to their benefit. Foreign policy issues are not really helping them. And so they've decided to just kind of keep foreign policy out of focus. Not out of focus, but put it off to the side, and it will keep focused on domestic issues because those are better for us. I think that's the way they look at it. So that's one of the reasons why the Americans have given Zelensky the cold shoulder. I don't think it's the only reason. It's also that the guy is a nut, and they're starting to recognize that. But they probably would have talked to him. Biden probably would have at least met with him. But they've decided that okay, that whole thing doesn't help us at all, and in fact, it kind of hurts us. Let's keep Ukraine out of the news. And I think they look at the same way. It's just like this conflict in the Middle East. It's not helping us. It's causing us a lot of harm. Within our base and whatever. Let's just try to keep that out of the news. But I'm not sure that if there is some sort of if a conflict should actually explode between the U.S. and Iran, or certainly between Israel and Iran. I don't know what kind of effect it would have, but I think they're calculating that at least in the short run it would hurt them. That maybe Trump would take advantage of that and say, "Look, if I were in charge," which is what he always said, this wouldn't have happened.
Right. Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems like the U.S. we're on this big ship and we spotted an iceberg in front of us, a mile away.
So we just right,
and we decided to stay course.
Yeah, we got to hit the iceberg. What else can you do?
Right, but you think that a popular move for a politician would be the person that would just turn the wheel.
Well, I think
miss the iceberg.
I think there's no question about it that it would be popular. That's what we're talking about. That do we really have a democracy? And there are all kinds of issues where that would be popular. right, for politicians to embrace. And that's partly what explains the success of Trump back in 2016. He started to say things that he wasn't supposed to say, but were very popular. And, part of it was just like, yeah, for no more wars in the middle, let's have a republic, not an empire. But that's not how these parties operate. It's the mega donors that really get to dictate policy. I mean, it seems like maybe it would have seemed like an extreme statement a couple decades ago, but I think it's just obvious now.
Mm-hmm. Well, in our last episode, you said something that I thought was interesting. You said that you have never been so uninterested in a presidential election as this one, which I think, if you think about what this presidential election's been like so far, we've had multiple assassination attempts on Trump, and if you just listen to
those have been interesting,
right? But if you just listen to the rhetoric on the media, they talk about this is just an existential election. This is the most important one of our time.
Yeah, well, they say that almost every time, but it is the rhetoric is even more heated this time around. You're right.
Right. So why are you so cynical that this election why are you so uninterested? Do you think it has no impact on, or very little impact, or just overshadowed by these global events, and that nothing really changes? We said democracy was an illusion. Do you still,
Yeah, well, I was just pointing out, again, it just doesn't really seem to matter what the people think. It's what the mega donors think, and what the deep state, its policies. Nothing, there can be changes, and not but I don't, I just don't know what kind. It could matter in limited areas, but all in all, it's just not going to matter, for all those reasons. And it's just the level of the debate, if you want to even call it that, is just so low that I just don't want to kind of demean myself by following it. The other day I was with our friend Chip, and I spent a couple hours, watching the news, and it was just, afterwards I just felt like my IQ had dropped like 30 points. Everything was just so stupid. It was just so empty, and it had so little to do with reality. I had that impression, but I walked away with that impression, just entirely confirmed, about this election.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, maybe you think that it doesn't really matter in terms of policy, but I think it is going to matter for Americans and the world, just because of the level of rhetoric that is being used. I don't know if you just saw recently at the CNN town hall that Kamala Harris was at. The question that Anderson Cooper asked was, General Kelly stated that, Trump is a fascist and a big admirer of Adolf Hitler, and some other former Trump administration people have said that he's a fascist. And then he asked Kamala, do you believe that Trump is a fascist? She says, yes, I do. He is. And so this type of rhetoric is gearing up again, ramping up, that we're equating Trump to Hitler, saying that he is a fascist, which I just feel like could lead to the groundwork for something seismic in the United States if Trump wins, regardless of who wins. But I think if Trump wins, you have the deep state that is clearly latching on to this idea that Trump is an existential threat, and that there could be some type of almost a mini civil war where you have kind of the deep state that just has this allergic reaction to Trump.
Yeah.
For whatever
I would
reason.
say actually probably clearly there is a good part of the deep state that has that allergic reaction, as you put it, to Trump. But I think a lot of the deep state actually learned the lesson of the first term, is that we can control this guy. Unfortunately, I think that's true, and I think they're right about that they can. But yeah, there is this hysteria and this overheated rhetoric. This is a threat to democracy. He's a fascist. He's literally Hitler, whatever that's supposed to mean. Like Hitler, with that's undergone some reconstructive surgery or something. Anyway, the word literally is always misused, so I won't go into that. But and yeah, that can lead to real extreme actions if in fact he does win the election, and if Hitler has won the election, then what, you are fully justified in trying to assassinate him or overthrow him or, to launch a coup. Clearly, if people really believe that, then they will take those kind of actions. Now, we saw, of course, during his first term that that very extreme actions were taken. Notably, the most important was the Russia hoax. But this time they could be even more and more, openly, more open, more overt actions, something in the nature of a coup. It's not impossible. Now, it's just always a question in my mind. A lot of people talk like that. And clearly some of them really, really believe it deep down. I think a lot of them, it's just sort of, it's play acting. It's just, they enjoy the drama of it and pretending to be fighting fascists. But, when push comes to shove, they don't really believe it. I mean, if they did, then they would launch a coup. We'll see,
Right. So, but I mean, maybe people within the deep state, some of them fully believe it, that he is, and that they may want to launch a coup. Others think they can control him. Others may just think, okay, yeah, we were just play acting. But I think a lot of the people, that have Trump derangement syndrome, I just don't see it. I'm afraid that there's going to be violence after this election. Do you think that's likely, that we'll start to see some real fissures in America where we can start to see things break away? I saw some polls, something like 25% of Americans think there's going to be a civil war after the election. I mean, that's just crazy.
Yeah.
That's
well,
just...
I don't see it. Partly, if Trump wins,
do you think they will just handle the election? They're laying the groundwork, saying he's a fascist, that they might do some legal...
Yeah. I think it's more likely that some sort of action would be taken at the top, a coup, something like that, or a new plot hatched against him. I think that's almost, I'm not expecting a coup, but I expect that there will be something similar, at least, to the Russia hoax. As for, violence on the ground, in the cities, yeah, it could happen. I mean, we've seen it, but I don't expect it. There are... those elements that riot on the Democratic side are, most of them aren't really highly political. I mean, they're not big supporters of Kamala Harris. I think that it's just more often that they're, it's actually, the criminal elements, plus, a few ideologues from outside, the Antifa. But I don't think we're going to see anything like the riots that followed. Right now this name is escaping me. Who's the guy that was
the George Floyd riots?
George Floyd riots, right? I don't think we're going to see anything like that. I think it's more likely that some action is going to be taken at the top. I think it's inevitable. It's just a question of what form it'll take.
Okay, well, I hope you're right. And you think that really this election is, after the election's over, is it going to play into how the U.S. handles these conflicts, like with Ukraine? Do you think that we'll begin to walk away? Israel will double down support? I don't foresee anything. I don't. It could. Again, there are people in the Trump camp that have expressed real and I think intelligent skepticism about our support for Ukraine, more than skepticism. And most notably J.D. Vance. It's just, unfortunately, I just don't have any faith in Trump. I mean, he talks to them and he probably agrees with them all in all, that like that's his natural inclination. That's why, he has some in his camp right now. But like just the other day, maybe it was yesterday, he was talking about possible, secretaries of state, and he began listing the same old monsters, Pompeo and company. And
really,
I kind of, that's kind of what I expect. I'll say not kind of, that's what I expect. Unfortunately, that's just been, that's been Trump. That's the way he was in 2016. Everybody's hoping that there's going to be a new Trump. I'm just much more pessimistic about that. I think we're going to see the same old Trump. And again, I hope that I'm proved wrong, but I don't think that I will be.
Okay. Yeah. All right, Dad. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to cover over the news?
No, I think that's probably it. We had our scoop. That was I mean, quite
Yeah.
quite seriously, I haven't seen that anywhere else. But
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I didn't. I have to talk to Peggy about that because yeah, I had no idea she saw some North Korean just on the metro there. Yeah,
yeah,
fascinating. Okay, well then I guess we'll end it a little bit earlier today. Um, have
sure.
a good rest of your day and a good weekend.
Okay, you too.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye.